What's up? What's up? What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Omnic Lab. This is episode 135. We're patching in on a Friday night, this time around in the U.S. time zone, and a nice Saturday morning, I might add, in Japan this fine morning. My name's Rob, and joining me, as always, is Andres Gomez. What's up, Andres? How's Georgia
What's up?
treating
What's
you?
up? Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's been a rainy, a little cold day over here, but I've gotten a lot done today, so I'm feeling good. I'm ready to finish off the day with a nice little quaint podcast about Overwatch.
Quaint. Yeah, I got a haircut this week, so I'm feeling light as a feather and no more headphone hair anymore on the sideburns. You know the struggles men and women alike. So I'm excited about that. This week on the show, as per usual, we talk about Overwatch strategy, but we're going to be doing a little bit more of an open source discussion that is not linked to patch notes for a change, which is going to be pretty exciting. We're going to be talking about basically different ranks and meta, because this is a very hot button issue within the community right now of Overwatch, whether you're in game, out of game, in the forums, on Twitter, whatever people are saying, lots of things about meta. So we're going to kind of like take a couple steps back, kind of go back to some basics, talk about what is meta, what is hero mastery, and how does it matter to you, and how do you define niche picks, and how good are they? So basically, let's get through all of those things in just a little bit. We're going to grab some announcements. So first and foremost, game night. Got a game night coming at the end of January on the 25th. You guys want to be there. It's always the last Friday of the month, so we're doing it on the 25th. So please come join us. All ranks are welcome. All regions are welcome. We only ask that you speak English and show up. So if possible, even if English is not your second language, we are welcoming you. And I, more than most, could totally relate to the not second language thing as of late. But Andres, why don't you run through our sponsorship here?
Yeah, absolutely. As always, we got Top Score Solutions being a great sponsor of the podcast. Top Score Solutions is an esports oriented community, is for business, education, analytics. They're trying to develop from the ground up. They're a really cool group over there. We recently had a podcast with them where we basically told the story about how Omnic Lab got to be. It was a really cool conversation. I recommend everyone to check it out. It's topscoresolutions.com. Over there, you can find everything, including their Discord community, where you can get in touch with all of them. Also, check out Omnic Meta, or partner website. They get you all of the stats and analytics that you will ever need for Overwatch. You can check out your profile. You can check out how you're doing in different heroes. He gives you a really nice breakdown of how you are performing. And not only that, also pretty cool articles on how the game is doing, how the meta is developing, and very cool analysis overall on how heroes are doing cool stuff over there. Also, check out Humble Bundle monthly affiliate. We're partnered with Humble Bundle. Very cool games that they got over there. Very cool packages. Last month they had Overwatch for only $12, so great deal. This month they have a couple different things, but as always, if you want to support the show and get some cool games for a really cheap price, that's the way to go. Use our link in the show notes or LinkedIn or Discord community to help us out.
All right, folks, let's talk about meta. Let's talk about it. So, Andres, how would you define meta? Because for me, I define meta as something simple. It's just, is this in the game? Is this popular? And is this strong? Because if this is the strongest and most popular thing, then those two things are kind of like the litmus test for if something is going to be meta or popularized. And generally speaking, the popularity supersedes the strength in a lot of cases, because sometimes people are interpreting the meta and the strength by virtue of just what is being used at the highest level.
Yeah, I think it's a combination, right? It's a combination of both what the highest ranks are perceived to be playing and also what has gotten popular, right? It's not only what one team is doing and cool strategy, it's more of what becomes popular. It becomes kind of like the go-to for the community. It's almost what the game starts revolving around. And in those terms, I would say it's a composition that is so popular and powerful that it tends to become the go-to composition, right? The standard by which things should be played. It's an ever evolving concept, I think. There's not always just one meta, especially in a game like Overwatch that can have so many hero changes or new heroes being introduced to the game. It's impossible to just stay in one single state of the game. So this is always changing, and the perception of what's powerful and what's the best at any given time is influenced by so many factors, right? Like what pro players are playing, what they're good at, what coaches are allowing their teams to do, or practicing strategies to beat other teams. So I think there's a lot of factors that influence it, but for the most part, uh, popular, I would say, is the word that defines it.
Also, special shout out to Luke the Duke Overwatch for a tier 1 sub during the live show this week. Big thank you to you. We also
Luke.
wanted to talk a little bit more about kind of just like, why is meta such a thing that people use as a buzzword? Because it is something that is not unique to Overwatch. This is something that has plagued video games for as long as I can remember.
Oh,
The meta
any
is this
competitive
gun.
video game is probably gonna have some mention of the meta.
Right, right. So the meta in Destiny 2 is running this particular like what's it called? Loadout of weapons combination with a particular class, and then what are your talents going to be associated with that? In Warcraft, it's like, what talents are you picking? What gear are you choosing? What is the best possible rotation for your damage of buttons to hit in sequence? What are you trying to do there? In Overwatch, it's manifested the meta by what, so supposedly this is how people are defining it, as what heroes you play in a combination together. But we are here to let you know that the meta is not simply choosing heroes. The meta is choosing heroes for a particular purpose to accomplish a particular strategy of a way in which you play, rather than like just the heroes that you pick. And Jeff Kaplan and Jane have touched on this and many different things. We talked about this briefly over the last show or 2 shows ago. We talked about this in short, but we wanted to expand on that this week. We thought it was a really good topic. So, Andres, what are some key differences between picking a hero and performing it in different ways? I guess you could say like goats, because that's what we've been playing like recently, right?
You mean like just picking a hero randomly, or picking a hero to like use it in a specific way? Is that the question?
The question is more of, okay, so you have team A and team B. You have team A wants to play goats and team B wants to play goats. So they pick heroes. So they're going to pick, Ana, Brigitte, Lucio, or Zen, Brigitte, Lucio, and Zarya, Diva, and Reinhardt. But are they playing the meta, or are they just picking heroes at that moment? Because choosing a meta composition is different than choosing to play the meta, if that makes sense. We're kind of like separating meta-based picks and meta-based play, I guess, is the kind of idea here.
Well, if you're talking from the perspective of just picking the heroes that are popular and that are the meta, versus picking the heroes and then performing on the heroes as appropriately, like performing the strategy appropriately, if that's what you're like trying to go for, then yeah, completely different. And it's something to really keep in mind. Just because you are playing the heroes that are categorized as meta, or the ones that are popular, the ones that keep getting played in pro play, doesn't necessarily mean that you're playing to the strategy that is getting played. And that's one very good distinction to make, and one big fallacy in the meta assumption, right? Just because it's the most popular thing at the top tier level, doesn't mean that you can just take that as it is and incorporate it into your gameplay, maybe in gold or silver, even platinum. Sometimes it's very hard to get some of these strategies to work. I don't know if you guys have ever tried actually playing goats on the ladder, maybe at some of the lower ranks. Sometimes it really backfires on you, even though it's known to be one of the strongest compositions in the game. Just picking the heroes and hoping for the best doesn't quite get you there. If you have at least one or two people that are not particularly clear on what they should do, usually those compositions fall apart very, very quickly, and they show gaps very, very quick, especially a composition like goats, which is so one-sided or skewed into favoring tanks and healers and foregoing a lot of mobility and a lot of the damage, no range, for example. Some people are not used to playing like this, and just throwing yourself into this kind of style can really backfire on you and not end up working the right way. I don't know if that's kind of like what you were trying to go for. That's kind of
No,
how I
that's
interpret the
exactly what I was
question.
going for. Yeah. So what do you think about this, Andres? Like what is valuable with understanding the meta? Because I feel like there is an overvaluation, I guess you could say, of what meta is and how meta works in Overwatch. But rather, I do think that there still is value in it, and I don't want to like remove it. You know what I mean? I don't want to say that there's no value at all in trying to do the meta or trying to do what's popular. I think that that is valuable for players, but when you're trying to perform, a goat's style of play, and you're mechanically and mentally and physically unable to perform what you're supposed to be doing with the heroes that you're given in like a silver rank, for example, or like a gold rank, then how how am I supposed to evaluate my usefulness in that venue? And like, how do I see how to transition better and better with the same thing that I'm playing? And how
Yeah,
do I, you know,
I,
delineate between those?
I think that's a really good question. And I think that knowing the meta is important. I think that if you want to improve as a player and be a proactive player in Overwatch, being aware of the meta and what is important, what heroes are being played, and how they're getting played, it's very important to be aware of those things because it teaches you, right? It shows you the possibilities of what at the highest ranks some people are taking these heroes to be. For a while, three tanks and three healers was like a joke composition, right? Like you if you play that, you were either trying to like get under the enemy's skin, or maybe you felt so overconfident that you were like, yeah, let's try this out. Very fringe kind of style of composition, very niche. But now it's sort of the norm, and it happened over time, right? It was a series of patches. Also, people haven't had a chance to play a wide variety of tanks and healers, giving people the time to get good at Diva, Zarya, Reinhardt, and enough time to like combine those together to start seeing like certain synergies between them, and eventually arrive to this conclusion that like, hey guys, I think if we play these three tanks and these three healers and we play them in this very specific style, we tend to stay together. We abuse Lucio speed boost so that or lack of mobility gets compensated. The amount of health and damage that we can push at close range is going to be unbeatable by a lot of different compositions. And it takes time to figure these things out. But once you get to like that conclusion, especially teams from like the Overwatch League, which are not only going on by intuition, but they're constantly analyzing those scrims. They're constantly analyzing the results of picking certain heroes in different circumstances, and even like analyzing the numbers. Right, they can go back to certain matches and like go like, "Hey, this is performing really well. Maybe we just need to change this, and here." And the composition gets perfected. And this takes so much time that the average player will never have the chance to like get to that level. But looking at what they're doing and analyzing like why that is good, it can teach you so much about the game because it shows you interactions that you had never thought about before. It shows you like, wow, if you combine these two people together, there's almost nothing the enemy team can do if they're playing this or that. And it informs you in that sense, right? Like you realize what things are really strong, what things are not as strong, and the gameplay evolves in that sense. It starts slowly to trickle down into the lower ranks. But blindly picking heroes because you just heard that this was the meta was one of the worst things that you can do, because you don't really know why they're good, or why they're being used and in what ways they're being used. Just picking a hero because you think is meta doesn't really do the job, right? If you're playing Moira, for example, but you're going full damage on Moira and your death ball is like in somewhere else, not getting healed, it doesn't matter how meta that composition might be at the time. You're just not gonna do anything for your team. It's gonna fall apart.
Yeah, I tend to agree because like this last week I haven't really been talking a whole lot outside of our Discord people, but I recently had joined a Oceanic team and then found that their scrim schedule was really low. And so I was able to find another team to sub for and played 2 scrims of theirs the last 2 days actually in a row. And for one team, I'm playing support and not playing a whole lot. And the other team, I'm playing projectile DPS. But as you know, with a meta where GOATS is popular, the projectile DPS players typically get put on Brigitte or they get put on Zarya, depending on your skill set. But what we've done is we've kind of found that we put our hit scan players on the Zarya, generally speaking, and that has worked really well for us. So that being said, um, there is a way in which playing the meta can help you because now you're learning a hero that maybe you're not comfortable on. But at the same time, it's important to understand that, especially at any rank where you're trying to improve to the point to get to the next rank, which is kind of how we orient the show. Why, like, you're trying to get to the next rank, you're trying to improve in Overwatch. If you're trying to do these things, ranks aren't necessarily what are going to reflect your skill level. But that being said, if you're playing regularly in that system, you will get to a point where the average rankings that you get to in your Overwatch career are going to kind of be where your skill level is. And not where you peak, not where your low point is, but somewhere in between those two numbers. Generally speaking, it's going to be on the upper end of that average, more or less, because you are going up and down. So you'll be up there, right? So that's why I don't really qualify myself to say I'm a diamond player. When people ask, I tell them I peak because that's what I'm proud of, right? That's how the typical player responds. So you say I'm 3150 or whatever it is that you've peaked at, or I'm a masters player. I'm a 3600 player. That's my peak, but I've decayed to 3000. So you can say something like that, or you can say I'm a silver player, but you're currently been playing in bronze for 3 seasons. It's just how people do. They don't like telling people that they're low. They don't like telling people where they're at currently. They like telling people what they've peaked at because that's their achievement. That is a progression system that they're trying to put into a skill-based system, right? So what does this mean for mastery of heroes? Well, this means that, like, when you're playing meta, sometimes you can't play what you want to play. And what we want to try to dispel is the myth that you have to play the meta, especially in ranked play where you're not competing in a league-based format where it's 6-on-6 Overwatch. And what I mean by that is it's not team-based. It's still team-based and ranked. Right? Don't get me wrong, but you're playing with people that you've never met before with no synergies that have been anything short of something that is inherent that you just happen to have when you match up with somebody. Andres and I have not played well together historically for a long time, and up until recently, we started to figure out each other's playstyle and been playing really well together. But it takes time, and that's why you're going to see teams in Overwatch League even and contenders and in the OD, the Open Division, where people are not playing well together, and it's not because they're bad; it's just because they're not able to play well together. You know, there's that synergistic type approach. So when you're mastering heroes, you have those two sides of the same coin where you're trying to master the hero, utilize its kit, run it properly, and then you also need to run it properly with the team that you've been dealt, whether that be a 6-stack that you've been practicing with or someone that's an individual that you've just met in ranked and you're in solo queue.
Right. And it's important to recognize that too, because sometimes when you're trying to play the meta, right? You try and play the composition is the most popular. And goats right now is the easiest to talk about because that's the meta that we're kind of coming out of. We're not really out of it yet, but the next patch, we're in for a mix
Possible.
up. So yeah, I have a feeling that we're coming out of this stage, kind of like we came out of Dive a while ago. But let's talk about goats, for example. Let's say you're a Genji Widowmaker player or something. I don't know. You've been playing Hanzo for a really long time, one of these heroes, and then suddenly your team needs you to go Brigitte or something to make goats happen. It just so happens that you've never played Brigitte in your life. You might be an incredible Hanzo player. You might have good game sense. You might have good mechanics, but the fact that you just never play Brigitte immediately puts you at a disadvantage going into this hero. You have to think about it almost, and Jeff Kaplan has actually talked about this on stream. I think it was with Fran that he talked about this, or Emong. It was with either one of those two.
One of the
But
two.
yeah, he basically said how it's very difficult for them to account when a player that is a magnificent Widowmaker, for example, goes into Brigitte and he's never played Brigitte. And all of a sudden, he's playing those two heroes at different elos. Like his Widowmaker might be like a 3400 Widowmaker. He's doing really good. Um, but his Brigitte might be more like at 2700. And even though it's the same player, like heroes interact so differently with the game, and you have to be paying attention to different things. And the muscle memory that you build on every hero is just slightly different for each one. And if you don't have those things kind of like on call, you're not able to capitalize as well as a person who does have those things on call. Even a Brigitte that's mechanically less good than this Widowmaker, but that has been playing Brigitte for a while, will probably perform much better on Brigitte most of the time. Even though this player could be quote unquote more mechanically skilled, right? Like he's saying might be on point, but the other player has actually practiced where to position his camera to get the best heals out of them. You know, where to position Brigitte, how to interact between his shield and changing into his bash and avoid taking damage. And he's practiced all these things, so he can do those things almost without thinking. And the moment when like shit really hits the fan, he can react quicker than the other player who might have to think twice, like, oh shoot, I should have used my heal over here, but you were like 2 seconds too late, right?
Not to mention when balance changes happen, like they've been doing for Brigitte, even Brigitte players have to change fundamentals. For example, the shield bash. The entire GOATS meta on its outset was built around Brigitte's healing ability and her ability to shield bash a Reinhardt out of the barrier so that you could get a shatter. Is the GOAT's strategy still strong? Of course it's strong. And it's been learned, but the key plays that you can set and the key engagements that you have now have one or two less tools that you could actually utilize because you can no longer stun a hero out of a barrier anymore. You have to flank, you have to be more creative, you have to be more risky, you have to take more risks. You have to take something where it's maybe even not an ideal play to even try to get a reward out of it.
Now
Um
that's a great point that you bring in over there. Not only is it the mechanical skill that you have to have on the hero and how you perform with it, but also how you interact with the rest of your team. Somebody who's been playing, let's say, Brigitte and Ryan for a really long time, they have had so many games with another Brigitte or another Ryan that they have learned to do these combos, especially if like both players are aware of the meta. They've been keeping up with pro play. They watch certain VODs here and there. They're keeping up with how their hero is getting played. Then you can set up these plays almost sometimes without comms. Like I think about nanoing Genji, for example. At this point in time, if you've been playing Nana for a long time, you almost have it ingrained in your head that if Genji has ultimate and he dashes into the air, you're nanoing him, right? It's like the Q. And an Ana who has been playing for a while just knows this instantly. And sometimes the Genji doesn't even need to speak. He just dashes in the air. The Ana has already pressed tab and she sees that the Genji has ult. And an unspoken link and combo happens between those two heroes. Same with like Zarya and Hanzo. That combo became so popular that you wouldn't even have to speak to the Hanzo. Like the second year graph came out, the Hanzo ultimate would come out. And you still see those things nowadays. Same thing happens with these compositions. Like before Brigitte could not stun over shields, the combo of stunning the Reinhardt and the Reinhardt shattering was one of the strongest combos this composition had because the shield was the only thing stopping you from shattering everyone behind it.
doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. So if you had that practice and you could pull that often, your composition would probably thriving over other compositions. But if you're not used to this, if you don't normally play Ryan and you're not used to reacting to your Brigitte stunning and then you shattering right after or trusting that she's gonna do it, then that combo is never gonna happen and your composition suddenly looks a lot weaker because you're not playing to its strengths.
Now let's kind of backtrack a little bit here, Andres, because I think we got a little ahead of ourselves with regards to talking about specific combos in that meta and mastery of that and kind of expectations. Because when we're playing at different ranks, the expectations are going to diminish greatly by almost equivalency of the ranks themselves, with you know a slight edge of mechanics being the slow, I guess you could say mechanics kind of slowly go up, but the ability of expectations and things that people expect you to do and combos to perform and how well you play together kind of go up more. Like there's a little bit more of a significant gap between the ranks, I would say, in that avenue, not so much in the mechanical department. I think the mechanical department is more of a slow burn as you kind of rank up versus like what you're doing in a game and your awareness and your reaction times and all of these other things that you're doing. So that being said, when you're doing things like running the meta comp or running even just like a hero at large in a specific rank in bronze, silver, gold, for example, because those are the the lowest to the mid. People when they're playing don't even hit a certain key on their keyboard often enough. For example, like if you're playing Hanzo, they don't hit the storm arrows button like when it's on cooldown or when it's like ready to go, or they're not utilizing like for I'll use one of the most tilting things, which happens to a lot of teams, is when their Ana has been sitting on Nano for 3, 4, 5 team fights. Or Zarya is holding on to Grav for 2, 3, 4 team fights, and you only see 2 Gravs the whole game, and one of them got eaten by the Diva. So, like, you have these scenarios where people are not utilizing certain things, and it's a little bit exacerbated, I think, by when people are watching Overwatch League, and you see them holding ults, and it's all talking about ultimate economy being like this big thing. But when you're playing with a bunch of random strangers and you're trying to like get an edge, ultimate economy becomes a little bit less important in those avenues, because what happens is people are sitting on ultimates that are high frequency of acquiring. For example, nano boost. You can get nanos and dragon blades so quickly that if you're using those, people are understanding that even in the ultimate economy, if you blow a certain ultimate, you can't really count that in your economy, right? Economy has inflation just like anything else, right? Like if you're using Moira ult, you're using Nano Boost, you're getting those ults really, really quick. So you don't really need to evaluate them quite as highly as you do maybe like an Earth Shatter or a Graviton Surge, for
Yeah,
example.
I mean, you still have to look at it as an economy, right? Except that the economy changes. You go into a different phase of the economy once you reach your ult.
That's true.
Before your ult, trying to put damage in the right places so you can build it up quick is the name of the game. The faster you can do that, the better. The second you get that ultimate, you go into an opportunity cost economy, right? Where every second that you're holding to that ult, the value of that ult starts decreasing quite rapidly, right? So the sooner you can use it and get value out of it, after you get it, the better. The more time that you're holding onto the ultimate, the less value that ultimate will have, because you have to think about it in the sense that it's eating up into the time that you could be using to get the next ultimate.
The next one.
Yeah, so like holding on to an ultimate basically is like borrowing money from the next ultimate, right? Or not borrowing money, but borrowing time from that ultimate. So something to keep in mind there.
But it's also giving you a little bit of a resource to understand if the enemy team has not used a certain ult over the course of time, that they're going to understand, I guess you could say, the higher up in the elos that you go, or the ranking system that you go, the more fights you go without doing something, the more of a guarantee that they're going to take is that you have it. So they're going to play around what you have much, much more efficiently the longer you hold on to something, because they know that you have it.
Right.
Conversely, that doesn't mean that they're not going to utilize their resources because of that.
And
they might be, you still might have the advantage by simply having it, but it doesn't mean that they're going to start not playing around it. Now, this is different at other ranks as a key, because most people at, bronze, silver, gold, and even platinum can't ult track to save their life. They have no clue. They're like, oh, they had Dragon Blade? What the heck? That's unfair. Like that.
Well, that's the
happens.
other part of the economy, right? Like, just because you got your ultimate online doesn't mean you should fire it right away, because firing it right away after you get it might mean you get no value out of it, right? Like, you're still trying to make that ultimate count for something, at least net you one kill, at least be able to force the enemy to at least bring one ultimate out to match your ultimate. But if none of those things happens, right, like you don't get a kill or you don't at least draw another ultimate because of it, you've lost value there. So it's a fine line of when do you use it that can actually get you value. The more value that it can get you, the better, right? Like if 3 people blow their ultimates to counter yours, great. If you kill 4 people with your ultimate, well, fantastic. um but yeah, quite a balancing act of when can you use it to get the most value out of it while not holding it too long so that you're actually going to get less value in the overall game because you're going to get less ultimates overall, making you have less of those opportunities. Although we got a little sidetracked here with
Yeah, we
ultimate
did.
economy over here, but yeah, it's a good discussion to have. It's all
Yeah.
these theory. I love thinking about all this theory in Overwatch, because it makes you a better player if you really start analyzing like why are you doing certain things. Coming back to meta, why are you picking these heroes? Why are you picking the meta? Like we said, it can be a fantastic roadmap. It can really show you what is possible in the game. If you're paying attention to it, you can inform yourself on what heroes you should be practicing at the moment. If you are a really competitive player, paying attention to the meta and actually learning the heroes that are being played in the meta. You don't have to learn them all, but you can at least learn one. Like for example, when goats started getting popular, I didn't start complaining like, oh, I can't play Genji, oh, I can't play McCree, I'm quitting this game. No, instead I was like, well, what heroes grab my attention from this meta? Well, I kind of like Zenyatta. I kind of like Zarya. I don't mind Diva as much. So I started focusing on those heroes. And like, guess what? Turns out with Zarya, you can get quite as many kills as you can do with Genji sometimes. It's just a
Mm.
slightly different playstyle. But if you take the time to learn it, and other people in your games take the time to learn it, sometimes you do go into those games where like, hey, these people actually do know how to play goats, and your games go really, really well. You stomp the other team. The meta composition comes to fruition, and you have a great game. That being said, you should learn to recognize when the meta composition is not working, when your team is not really playing it to its strengths, and even though you might be playing the right heroes for that composition, people are just not utilizing the right way, right? Like your Reinhardt might be playing at a huge range, more like a Orisa or something, or maybe your Zenyatta is flanking to the side and getting picked all the time, and you just never have the transcendence to keep your team alive or something. Um, Learn to recognize those moments and ask to yourself, is there a hero where I would have more impact? Am I playing my best hero in this moment? Or is there a different composition that doesn't have to be meta, right? Like you can win in Overwatch with the craziest compositions. I've won maps with 6 DPS, and it sounds ridiculous. And you might be thinking, well, the other enemy team must have been like scratching their bellies or something. But honestly, if all of your team is just fantastic at DPS and okay at like goats, for example, you might actually have a better chance just like brute forcing it and trying it out.
We won
Um,
one of our scrims this week with a 3-2-1 setup for DPS, support, and tank, and the tank was Diva. So it was a nuts comp, and we just steamrolled with it. It's possible. If you
it
are better
is.
than the enemy team in each of your individual roles, as well as how you work together, you are the better team. And Overwatch is actually quite interesting that sometimes it's very, I would say it's more rare than in other games where the weaker team can end up beating a stronger team by virtue of just mistakes. But I feel like at large in Overwatch games, the better teams typically will win. A lot of the times, it's very rare that the better teams lose. To be honest,
As
there's a
yeah,
couple key things there
and
that
here's the
would
thing
change,
though,
but
like sometimes the matchmaker might actually match two teams that are on paper equally matched. Like these players are around the same ranks, they should be able to like at least counter each other. But one team might have 2 people playing heroes that are not their best. You know, they're not 100% at their skill with these heroes. They might be like at 80% of their skill. They're not bad, but they're just not as good as they are with their best hero. And suddenly one of the teams stomps the other team and you're like, oh, this matchmaker is super crappy. And it's really hard to tell, right? Like who was underperforming, because the people who were underperforming sometimes are not even playing bad, but they're just not playing at that quite particular level, right? They might not be playing at like a 3300 diamond level. They might be playing at like a 3000 diamond level, And like that 300 difference is a difference. That means the other team is putting a little bit more damage. One team is taking a little bit more damage than they're used to, and that can make a difference in the long run. I recently had a game in Junkertown, now that you mentioned like winning games with off meta, where we didn't have a main tank player. Nobody in our team played main tank. Thankfully, we had two guys that were like, well, we'll play tanks, but they picked Zarya and they picked Hammond for Junkertown. So like if you're following pro play or you're used to Junkertown, that's usually a no-no, right? The second you see a Zarya and a Hammond as your front line in Junkertown, you usually say to yourself, oh man, we're gonna have a problem. But you know what? Nobody complained. We realized, you know what? Nobody wants to play Reinhardt because none of them are good at it. So let's just try this out. On attack, went pretty smooth actually. With a couple hiccups here and there, we were able to finish the map with like 2 minutes left. So not a bad time for what you would think it's a composition that is not the ideal for that map. Then we go on defense, and same thing. Nobody picks a main tank player because nobody's good at main tank. And we're like, okay, well, let's see how it goes. On defense, not as easy, right? You don't have a front line. Your team is a lot more susceptible. They were playing like the good old Bastion Orisa composition. So, not having a shield to engage that was pretty hard. But it turns out that because all of our team was playing the heroes that they were good at and not trying to fill on like the hero that they were not, we were struggling on defense, but slowing them down more than they had slowed us down on attack, them playing, a meta comp. Towards the end of the map, they had about 2 minutes left, which is what we ended it with, and they were about to finish the map. So I was like, you know what? We're really close. All we need is a front line. I'm not a good Ryan, but my team is doing really good right now, and I know that the only thing I need to do is just stand in front of them and enable them. So last 2 minutes of the map, I go Ryan, and sure enough, we full hold them the second I pick Ryan. Like, they didn't move any more than there. But for most of the map, we run an off-meta comp, and then after seeing what our true weakness was, I just filled it. I just filled that gap right at the very end, and we were able to win the map. Everyone was happy. Nobody yelled at each other. So I don't know. Sometimes in Overwatch, it's about being reliable and a little bit not reliable, but flexible. A little flexible with your picks and taking into account like, is it a good idea that we force everyone into this meta, or is it better that we just let everyone play what they're good at?
Yeah, I'm glad Andres brought this up because this is actually what was the transition for getting into niche picks and talking about it within meta and off meta. Because hero mastery is a big thing. It is something that affects everyone. It's something that you have heroes that you're better at than others innately because you play them more, or you're more comfortable on them, or you just like any number of reasons why you choose a certain hero over others, whether it's meta or whether it's just because that's what you want to play. But it's important to note that sometimes what you want to play isn't what you're good at, even if it's your best hero. And it does happen. This is something that I've talked with Thrill, actually. Shout out to him in our podcasters hangout thing where we play games every once in a while. He's told me, he's like, I know that you main this, but you should be playing this because this is much better. And even if your team doesn't need you, at this rank, when you're playing in diamond games, the bar is already at the low bar is already set higher. So you can trust that, somebody playing the role that you're used to playing very well and could climb with is already going to be, either taken or it's just going to be like available for someone else to do. And you're much better at this. So you should do that. And for me, I've always felt like the heroes that I've liked to play and I've really enjoyed playing, I was never really like that great at them. But apparently, my Hanzo's improved drastically over the course of the last 2 or 3 seasons and ended up pushing me into Diamond overall on top of my Ana play. and actually got me a slot on this team to play some projectile DPS. And a lot of this stuff translates when you're playing projectiles with other heroes like Pharah, and the positioning kind of actually with Hanzo, I've been finding some things that have worked for me, and May play as well with the projectiles kind of being similar speeds to Ana's dart mixed with Hanzo's old arrow, which I was very used to shooting. And so anyways, that being said, I think hero mastery is something that people really neglect as being a value when Andres and I were talking about off meta picks, because off meta doesn't even have to be non-goats. It could just be like non 222, because for whatever reason I've been hearing reports and had experience when I was playing briefly in bronze on a second account experiment with some friends. You know, the bronze and silver in particular are like slaves to thinking that 222 has to happen, like in every game. If they're not playing 222, you're just going to lose. And I don't know why that's the mentality, but it is. And I even had people telling me that I needed to switch off of Hanzo in silver, when the second I switched off of like a healer or a tracer to like not play that hero anymore, and they're like, no Hanzo please, no Hanzo please, and I just walked into the point and 1v4'd and shot 4 headshots and won the point. And they're like, yeah, I would prefer if we had something else. And I'm like, these guys don't even look at the kill feed at this rank, so I don't even know what to tell you. You know, so you have to understand that sometimes the people's awareness of what is good and what your teammates are giving you feedback could also be faulty in how you're mastering a hero. And you're not going to master a hero if you don't sit down and put the hours in of sucking on it for a while. It just has to happen. If you want to be good at something, that's what Yankee told me. He's like, if you want to practice Zarya and get good at her, you're just going to have to pick her and play her a lot. There's no way around it.
That is true. That's the only way to improve this game, just playing them a lot. And what you were saying is very true. Sometimes you are going to be forced to play other heroes. It doesn't matter how much I love playing Ashe, how much I love playing Genji. Sometimes I go into games where there's already a guy that is playing Ashe, or already a guy that is playing Genji, and we're missing something else. And in those moments, it's good to be a versatile player. It's good that you have heroes that are not in your particular role, not in your preferred role. Because if you don't, you're going to run into games where nobody's willing to switch. And if nobody's willing to switch, there's going to be gaps in your team, and maybe nobody else can fill in those gaps. And you're going to make yourself play the game in hard mode in those games, rather than just taking the high road and being like, you know what? I'm also a great Zarya. I'm just going to go Zarya. Or, you know what? I've been practicing my Zen. I can actually frag out on Zen and stop the enemy team through my transcendences. There's so many heroes that can like provide so much value into this game. And you should not be scared to branch out a little bit. And when I say branch out, is don't just play heroes in your same role. Learn at least one hero on different roles. At least one tank, at least one support hero, and not just like play it once in a while. Like really learn it, like your main hero
During
like,
the course of that season, yeah.
yeah, during the course of the season, put in some time so that you develop the muscle memory. You feel super comfortable. You know what to do with a hero. You get your ultimate fast because you're knowing how to put in the damage, where to put in the damage. You're not dying often because you know where to position with that hero. You can clutch out certain fights. They come in 1v1 you. And guess what? You have had the practice on Zenyatta. You're able to juke the Genji deflect, and then you charge up your, right click, and then you triple headshot him in the head because you've done that so many times that is just kind of like a piece of cake for you. Get to those levels, you know what I mean? Where like you feel really confident with those heroes. And it makes you such a more competitive player. And it's almost required if you want to climb up to the higher ranks. Unless you're like duo queuing with somebody that's an amazing support, and maybe you're an amazing tank, and one of you guys can fill in DPS if you need to. If you're solo queuing, especially, having a variety of heroes to be good at is so important. And what I mean good at, I mean like really good at. Like be like, hey, one of my DPS is as equally as good as one of my supports, and is equally as good as one of my tanks.
I only play the brothers and their grandma. That's all I play. And play with the Shamadas and Ana. That's it.
And now I'm not saying you can't specialize because you can, right? Like there's some pro players, like one of the number one players in the EU right now, like Astro, I think is his name. He almost always just plays Lucio. And if he plays another role, is Zenyatta, which are, off healers. That's his field of expertise. And he's
That's his
so
thing.
good. Yeah, he's so good at those heroes. When you watch him play, is impressive. And he's like number one in the ladder. He only needs to play those two heroes because he plays them at such a high level that there's no point in playing anything else. If he goes into a game at that level, they already know him. They already know he's that kind of Lucio. So nobody's going to try to take the Lucio from him. I mean, it might happen in occasions, but for the most part, he's done that. So you can do that as a player, but
Mhm.
I think that you're gonna put yourself in hard mode most of the time because unless you're grinding Overwatch like 8 hours a day to get yourself to like that level of proficiency in a hero, you're just gonna have better quality of games
Mhm.
if you can play a variety of roles. Like for us mortals in like platinum and
For us mortals.
diamond at the most, you know what I mean, and below everything
Yeah.
else below. I think you just benefit from a wider pool than anything else.
Now, to speak to that and also transition into another thing that I wanted to kind of talk through with regards to hero mastery for starters is that what Andres is bringing up is really really good, but there's another approach that you can take to learning, and it's in the same venue. It's instead of picking something that you're like, this is something that I need to practice. I'm going to put the hours and I need to practice this, and this is what I've chosen to do if I need to get put into this position, right? You can also just really try to choose the hero based on what you've actually been able to monitor on how your overall team strength has been in the course of that game, or even just in hero select. If, for example, when I'm playing with Andres and Yankee and Deathblow, for example, if I'm just playing with that team and Thrill, sometimes there's games where they need me to play support, and there's other times where I need to play like Winston or I need to play, DPS. But when Yankee and I are in the same six stack and he picks Farah, I know it's time to go Mercy. You know what I mean? Like it's like it needs to happen. And then if Andres especially is playing with us and we have a Genji Farah and we don't have a Mercy, that whole team comp is crippled, I feel. A lot of times you can play that with an Ana and a Mercy, and I feel like that's the most ideal situation for our team comps because we're farming ults, we're getting Farah, and we're getting Genji their ultimates way faster because of the damage boost, and then we just go in with Valkyrie and just wipe everything. So it's just like this really weird transition where you're kind of observing the six stack that you normally play with, or you're observing your duo queue, trio queue partners that you monitor. You say, okay, well, I'm going to go into this scenario, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do everything in my power to synergize with this one or two other people. You're already at an advantage, a distinct advantage with other players, and that's why people duo queue and trio queue in the first place. Is because they actually found somebody they can trust to maneuver their hero pool around. The problem happens when other people are doing that too, and you and your partner are Pharah Mercy, and the other partner is a Pharah Genji, a Genji Mercy combo, and so then you have this other guy that's random that joins your group that doesn't play tanks either, and then you get in a situation like Junkertown, like Andres is describing, where you may or may not pull it out based off of how good your team is. You know what I mean? So you sometimes have to pigeonhole yourselves and also just be flexible within having the setup of synergy. Okay. Now,
Yeah, and like there's like
Andres, you want to say anything to
that's
that?
super valid because there's so many ways to win in Overwatch, right? Like one, playing the strongest composition known in the game that has been tried and proven by the pros, learning how they play it and trying to play it as close to them as you can. Obviously, you're gonna make a lot of mistakes along the way, but doing that can allow you to win. It's a tried and proven thing. You know it works, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Another way to win is like what he just said. You just know that there's a particularly good player in your team that if you enable that player, he's gonna give a huge headache to the enemy team. And this one is not so much relying on meta, but it's more relying on what does this player play and what are the heroes that can best support this player. So in the case of Yankee, he's a monster Pharah, and you know that as long as
Yeah.
he's alive and shooting at people in Pharah, he's gonna get a ton of work done. So things like I'm gonna go Mercy and just keep him alive forever so that he never dies. If he does die, I just resurrect him and we still have him. Maybe taking a Zarya that can do grafts and shields for him so he can get the most out of his barrages, or as Zenyatta too, that he can put his orb and suddenly he has Mercy and orb and like nobody's killing Yankee at this point. That is super valid too. I think they call that like
This
protect the
is
president or something. Just your
I mean,
valuable
this is how
player.
meta comps like even develop. Like you figure out when you get a whole team of players that are real good at the game at pretty much everything, you can kind of just pocket whatever you need. And then you kind of figure out what's strong. That's how goats developed. People realized that you could just bash the crap out of every Reinhardt that exists because the shield doesn't matter anymore. And goats realized that it's real freaking good to run it with Zenyatta because now that you can't bash the shields anymore, if somebody's out or even has an ounce of misstep in their positioning, Zenyatta and your entire team can punish them when you're at close range by just slapping a Discord on them and blowing them up. So that's how these things are kind of developing, as people are just like utilizing what is strong and how to gain an advantage when you're pocketing specific strategies, or not even pocketing, but just kind of like utilizing the strengths of each of these kits to the best that they can be. And then sometimes if a particular hero is just innately stronger, i.e. Brigitte, right? Or Zenyatta, innately stronger in their kit than other heroes, you're building the composition to maximize what they do, a la New York Excelsior, Jonak on Zenyatta. They built their entire team, not just their roster, but also their entire game strategy around making Jonak just blow people up.
There's so many ways to win in this game. Yeah, like another one that we mentioned is everyone just goes what they're good at. You're not worried
Yep.
about, do we have tanks? Do we have healers? I mean, hopefully one of those people plays a healer and one of them plays a tank, but just play what you're good at. And sometimes
Yeah.
the people in your team are so good at their heroes that you just outplay any composition that the enemy team could be bringing at you, even if they're playing more in meta than you are. Then there's also trick compositions, right? Like sometimes you can win fights by tricking the enemy team into doing certain things, like stepping away from the point. Or sometimes the enemy team is so confident that they're kicking your ass that you can just go like Genji or Sombra or Tracer and pull off a Zune where you just go behind them and step on the payload without them noticing, and you just cap it yourself, right? Like that's a valid strategy
Fitzy does
too.
this so much. It's still ridiculous.
There was recently there was a contenders team. I can't remember the team name, and I feel really bad because it was kind of like on Reddit, and it was a fantastic play, but they were playing in Nepal in the enclosed sanctum, I think it's called. It's like the enclosed one
Yeah.
in Nepal that has like the abyss to the side of it.
Yeah, Sanctum.
And they were playing against goats, and the composition they were playing was like a Orisa Diva. So their front line was definitely not going to win against not ghosts, goats. But what they did was they put the Orisa on the edge of the abyss, only blocking with her shield, and the Diva
And they
was,
baited it.
yeah, basically baited, and they kind of knew they couldn't go near the abyss because the Orisa would just pull him into it with the pull. But what the Orisa did was amazing. She instead shot the pull upwards, and the Lucio from her team was wall riding near the edge. And as soon as everybody gets pulled upwards, the Lucio just boops him, and everybody falls into the abyss, basically getting rid of goats, a composition that they know has to play on point, has to play together. And they were like, how do we actually displace all of them? Well, we pull him upwards with Ariza, and then we boop him with the Lucio while riding to the side. Amazing strategy, and you don't have to beat anyone mechanically or outplaying with like some sick widowmaker shots or anything. No, you're just assess the situation. You're like, hey, we have this tool, we have this tool. Let's use him this way.
Let's
Get rid
combine
of
them.
Yeah. So I don't know. Overwatch has many different ways to win. The meta is definitely more of a guide. It can show you what the strongest things can be at the moment. It's a great way to learn what is possible in Overwatch and what at the top level have discovered to be the strongest combos and compositions, and hopefully take that and adapt into your own gameplay as you see fit. but don't feel obligated to just follow the meta blindly. And please, please, please don't just follow it blindly because they tell you these 6 heroes are the best that you can pick. Know why those heroes are the best, how they work together, and analyze in your own game. Can this work? Do we have the resources to pull this off? Or are we just trying to pretend like we can all do this while nobody here has played these heroes before?
And we had a quick KFC Forever in the chat giving us 100 bits and said that he
Woo!
listens to the podcast at work. Really, really appreciate the support. You guys can do that at twitch.tv/OmnicLab if you guys want to hang out with us when we're recording. Let's close up our meta discussion by talking about the niche. How do things that are niche pop up? It's just basically niche means something that's been underutilized that turns out to be not too bad. In general, people that get this tag in Overwatch would be your heroes like Symmetra, Torbjorn, Bastion, Mei, Reaper. Those would be qualified as niche heroes. Now, the odd thing about niche heroes is that in general, the support hero roster doesn't qualify any of them as niche. And in the tank roster, they're much more of a limited number. So in general, the niche role kind of gets put on a Orisa or a Roadhog sometimes, but it's very much on a more of like a map contingency plan rather than a niche in general thing. And the same kind of goes for the supports, like historically speaking, but there's just not a whole lot of them. So niche heroes typically are in the damage category. Now, that being said, what is the purpose of niche heroes? Niche heroes is the purpose of counters. Countering heroes. How do I understand what counters me? How do I understand what counters them? You have to look at it from a few different approaches for hero counters. The first would be team compositional counters. If people are running goats, how do you counter it? Well, you run goats, right? No. You have different things that you can run to counter goats based off of the map. That's why people have been developing a Hammond boop strat, like Andres was saying, on Nepal. You've got the whole setup with Pharah on Ilios with Mercy that you can do. There's all kinds of different ways that you can, whether or not it is a true counter or a counter that is perceived, it's something that you can say, I'm going to counter it by doing this. That's what you can say for a compositional counter. More commonly in our games, though, would be more of the hero counters. So hero counters would be saying, okay, this team is not that great. We're probably going even, but this one player kills me over and over and over and over again, and we need to deal with this. So how do I do this? Is it because that player is that good, or is it because I'm not playing properly and they're punishing me? Because those are two different questions that need to be addressed. So we're kind of going at this approach of saying that you're not the problem. But in general, it's going to be probably a combination of both. So you're going to pick a hero based off of how to deal with that threat.
Yeah, niche heroes are interesting because the way I see niche heroes are heroes that have a narrower scope, that are intended for specific purposes and are not as well rounded as some of the other heroes that can maybe be used in a wider variety of uses. Like when I think about a very versatile hero, I think of Ashe, for example. Ashe is a DPS that can play so many different styles and can be fit into so many different compositions because her kit allows her to, right? With Ashe, you can play high ground, you can play low ground. It's easy for you to get around the map. You have a pretty wide range where you can fight medium, long range, even a little bit of short range. Your ultimate allows you to do things like contest the payload or win a 1v1 or get an extra body in the fight to even things out. And your dynamite allows you to do a lot of AoE damage. So you're not only good at single target, you actually can do a significant amount of damage to multiple targets. So she fills a wide scope of things, right? You can fit her into so many compositions. She doesn't feel
McCree has right
weird.
click, so he has so many situations that he can be good.
McCree, on the other hand, narrower scope. Yes, amazing flashbang, amazing fan the hammer skills. You can just kill anyone who's in front of you. The second they start playing high ground, the second they start running away from you, and you actually have to walk up the stairs and take long flanks, maybe stray away from your team to makes you a little bit vulnerable, or people are just not playing in your range, then his scope kind of falls down a little bit, right? Like you can't be using them in as many situations as maybe you could be using Ash. Even though McCree is still pretty wide in scope, but once we go into
Yeah.
heroes like Torbjorn, for example, Torbjorn is a very niche hero. And granted, a lot of these heroes have been changed and evolved over time. His scope is much narrower, right? Like with Torbjorn, you don't have a lot of mobility. Your fire, your the way that you shoot your gun is quite wonky, right? Compared to some of the other heroes that can be so precise at different ranges. With Torbjorn, a little bit more dicey with that. But amazing at, for example, countering compositions that want to play in front of you, like goats. You put the lava in front of them, your turret is shooting them from the side. They don't really have a lot of tools to get rid of you. You also have your molten core to make you quite resistant and be able to take the fight at close range and actually
Take
make you
risks.
a big threat. But aside from that, he's not overall good, right? He's not mobile. He can't work and dive it very well. You can't take him on composition like goats, for example. He just doesn't fit on some of these other game plans.
And there's also stuff that you have to understand in the game of Overwatch. When something is niche, it may just be niche because they're a hero. Like, I'll use the example of Mei and Rialto for right now, because this is something that we've been talking internally with one of my teams, as well as like just in general with other friends. Is when you're playing Rialto, Mei is freakishly scary and good against goats, especially because goats has to play together, and there are so many tight chokes where Mei can utilize her wall. So what happens is when you set up at a choke or a high ground, you wait for the team to engage, you wall somebody or some people off and split the team into 2 and 4 or 1 and 5, and you kill one, and then you win the game because you just keep doing that over and over again. And you can do this on offense and you can do this on defense. It just depends on how your team's approaching and how much better you are than the enemy team at doing it, and as well as the urgency in which you can pull this off. Is Mei a GOATS hero? Absolutely not. But does Mei counter goats? Yeah, I guess you could say in that situation. So she would be qualified as a niche hero that's a little bit more narrow in scope as far as her usefulness is concerned. But when niche heroes shine, they shine real bright because they're super good at what they do in that specific scenario. Now, does this mean that the niche hero should always be viewed as niche? No, absolutely not. Niche is only defined by the converse principle of
Its
the
usefulness.
meta,
I mean, if
right?
there comes a meta where like Mei fits into a lot of different compositions, or the
Then Mei
composition
is
at the
meta now.
moment, then Mei becomes mainstream, and you're using Mei all the time.
Right. So we saw this a lot with McCree and stuff beforehand when we got other stuff. We saw Reaper hit the meta with Beyblade way back when. We talked about that last week. So meta is basically just what's being popularized. So be careful when you call people out, or even just like say, let's run goats, and people are playing Moira into goats. You're like, well, people have kind of like set up goats as saying anything that is 3 tanks and 3 heroes that are healers is goats. Is kind of semi disingenuous. Like, you might be thinking that that's goats, but it's really not. It's typically need like goats. If goats doesn't have a Lucio and a Brigitte as its mainstay with a Reinhardt and a Zarya, you're not playing goats. Like, those are the 4 cruxes. The other healer that you run, whether it's Zenyatta, Ana, or Moira, is okay. But if you're running a Mercy with that, that's not goats. You're also just running something else. The people have been trying to use OATS as kind of like the end card, and then saying
Oats,
floats or oats
floats.
or dotes or whatever by modifying the
Yeah.
goats thing to being something different that it's not.
At this point, it's
So
more
just be
like,
careful.
like goats has become like a brand, and then you have like all these like off-brand kind of like cereals coming in trying to like copy the one, but
Got
they're
the
not they're
Lucios,
not
and then you
quite
have
the
everything
same. You
else.
know what I mean? They're not quite the OGs.
Lucio O's, and then everything else. Let's be honest. So, anyways, that being said, I think that some things that might run through your brain as when you should choose a hero would be niche heroes have more value when, finish the sentence, countering heroes is more necessary when, the reason we need to change our entire composition is because these type of things are stuff that kind of hits me home when I'm kind of thinking about when I should switch. The last thing here, I think, on the stuff that I wanted to discuss, Andres, is actually something I forgot to put in the show notes here that kind of came up, which is when you're choosing a hero, I want you to. Gosh dang it, I totally lost this. I had this in my head, and
No
then
worries. Well, I have a little conclusion here I wanted to make.
okay,
If you want to think about it while I do it,
yeah, sure,
at the end of the day, we're not trying to tell you, hey, this is how you should play the game. Hey, forget about meta. Hey, play off meta heroes or don't play off meta heroes. That's not really the point of this discussion. The point of the discussion is more to be realistic about what meta is and be more analytical or critical about how you think inside of your games. Don't just autopilot into thinking everyone should play this. You have to be honest with yourself and you have to be honest with the people that are playing with you. You most of the time you don't know who you're playing with, and having a hard plan in your head like everyone has to play this, if they're not playing this then they're doing it wrong, I gotta tell them what to do, is usually a bad idea. I think that for the most part, you have to be a little bit flexible in Overwatch. Some games you will win playing meta compositions. Some games you will win with a composition that you had no business playing with. Sometimes you are gonna lose playing in meta compositions. Sometimes you are gonna lose because your team didn't play a composition that synergized very well, and the other team did. And sorry, that's just the way it goes. Um, but be analytical and be open minded about ways that you can win. Be creative with it too. There's so many ways you can solve the puzzle, and if you only think that the meta is the only solution to it, you're gonna be slamming your head against a brick wall a lot of the time.
yeah, yeah, I agree. I think the thing that I actually was able to remember here is that when you're trying to play Overwatch and you're trying to branch out, I think because I wanted to circle back to branching out as being kind of like the main goal here, right? We want our community to feel like they can try new things, they can be more risky, but it's informed by two things. You need to be playing Overwatch regularly if you want to improve. It's something that we don't really emphasize enough, but you cannot improve in the game if you're not playing enough. And you have to understand that if you're not playing enough, you have to understand what enough means. Enough is a certain amount of hours in a week, or a certain amount of hours in a month, or a certain amount of hours in a season. And I kind of slowly kind of found out what that was for me. And in general, I had a lot of people kind of giving me some feedback with regards to kind of a baseline thing, is kind of like you want to try to hit that 50 hours mark for a season. It's not really asking a whole lot of you, but if you kind of break it down, 50 hours kind of translates to 10 hours of Overwatch a week for 5 of the weeks. And a
Yeah,
month is, 4 weeks, right?
and
So I think that that's
honestly,
kind of your baseline.
for some people, like that might be a lot. We get it. Like a lot of
It's
people
a
have
lot.
busy lives, they have jobs, they have families. Sometimes you have school. You can't really dedicate as much time as you would like to Overwatch. But then you have to be realistic to yourself, because we've said it many times in the
Right.
podcast before. Overwatch or improving at Overwatch is like going to the gym, right? You have to work out, and if you don't work out often enough, you're gonna hit a plateau quite fast and you're gonna level off, you're not gonna
Mhm.
continue to improve, and the only way to really continue to improve is to keep pushing yourself, and most of the time pushing
Right.
yourself involves spending a significant amount of time practicing the game. Then we get into a whole new discussion about efficient practicing and practicing the right
Right.
things and not mindlessly out of botting into your games. But the point is, one of the most important factors to improving is definitely consistent play. I would say, like, if you want to see an improvement almost right away, find out a week where you have some extra time and play at least 2 to 3 hours a day. I know that like that's quite a lot to ask of some people. Like I can't even play that much anymore with school and with a girlfriend and all these responsibilities. I can't even do that much. But then I'm realistic, right? Like if I want to keep improving at the game, I'm probably gonna have to make some time for it, and so will you. And just do the test. Play 3 hours every day for 1 week and track your results. Go to one of those stat tracking websites or however you want to track him, but something that shows accurate tracking at least. and see how you perform on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, and see how you're performing by the next Monday. And it's a significant increase in how you're playing.
And it's also important to understand that the increase that you're getting is in volume. It's not going to immediately reflect by saying, "Oh, if I play more hours of Overwatch, I automatically get higher SR." That's not what we're trying to advocate here. We're trying to advocate that you're getting better by gaining experience in the game on what you are playing. It doesn't necessarily translate to a ranking system. It will translate to that long
Eventually,
term
it
if you keep
does.
up with it,
Yeah, if you keep up with it, eventually it does. But you're right.
but
The long term
not in the short
SR
term.
games usually don't come right away. But you start noticing a lot of the mistakes that you're making. The game starts slowing down. It's kind of weird how it happens, but like it's almost like the matrix has changed its speed, and like suddenly you're able to see the bullets coming at you that you were not able to see before. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and with relationship to this, I think that like Andres was mentioning, there is a whole can of worms on diverting this whole discussion to a whole nother like thing on mastering heroes by making sure your practice and your play is efficient rather than being just lazy. And we talked a little bit in the pre-show that we played up against a team this week in my scrims where they had a gold player on their roster and a like GM Smurf on the same team that we were playing as a diamond average SR team. And it's not anything against the hero that they chose to play, but it's rather the hours that I'm trying to emphasize here. They played almost 700 total hours on Mercy. And their current rank in the last like 5 seasons was like mid gold. That is a key example of somebody that is not really utilizing their hours in Overwatch and has got a lot of lazy time in the game
I
that
almost want to
doesn't
ask
want to
him
like
too, like what
output it.
computer they're using, because sometimes there can be outside circumstances that might be
Laptop
keeping you.
heroes, man.
Yeah, like it's a hamster like running his laptop from the inside or something, like because putting that much time into a hero without seeing a significant improvement either means that maybe several people are playing that account, or yeah, he's just autobotting on it, not really paying attention, not trying to improve, but just kind of like repeating his same mistakes over and over. But I would say that anybody who plays that much amount of time will see some improvement, and maybe it might be something else that is holding them back.
Yeah, I would even venture to say that this is not an uncommon occurrence. For people that are willing to put in the hours in Overwatch, there's not a whole lot of people willing to put in the hours of Overwatch to be thoughtful about it. I've seen people with gold borders in silver rank before. I've seen people with platinum borders in platinum rank before. It doesn't mean that they're good. It just means that they play the game a crap ton and that they've not really realize that this is a team game or something, like it happens. So just remember when you're playing the heroes and you're putting in the hours in your fall, the number one recommendation I would say is go outside of yourself and look for help. Look for resources, look for players to look at your play. Because there is sometimes where Andres has told me when he was looking at mastering Genji for the first time, he had to get somebody to help him out look at his own footage. He's like, I can no longer benefit from looking at my own stuff anymore. I need somebody else to take a look at it. And that's how I got good with Ana. I had somebody sit with me in a custom games and practice darts, practice approaches, practice cover, practice with Jay Lee saying, hey, you did a lot of this stuff and that is no bueno, my dude. So like even just going from one rank to the next instead of like going from bronze to platinum in like 2 seasons. It's just you gotta be realistic, you gotta be feasible, you gotta play on purpose, and definitely shoot to play a lot more than you currently do. Because I will tell you, people that are in bronze and people that are in silver in particular, the common denominator with these players is non-thoughtful play and not enough play. Those are the two most common things that I get with those people in those ranks that I've
Absolutely.
talked to.
And critically think. Don't just blame it automatically on other people, on your team, on your composition. Don't just blame it on things that are outside of your control either. Critically think and always ask yourself, could I have done better there? Could I have played another hero that could have done better there? Is it really a matter of composition, or is it a matter of execution? Like the other day, we had a game in Nepal where both the Reinhardt and the Mercy kept complaining that we were not doing enough damage, that they were dying too fast. The problem was that both the other DPS and me were doing an insane amount of damage, and we were getting an insane amount of kills. That what we realized later in the game was that our Reinhardt player was a support main player, and the way that he was playing Reinhardt was not only incredibly aggressive, but he was expecting for him to like go in just charging in, and he thought that that was enough time for the DPS to get in there and just kill everyone and save him so that he wouldn't die. But we kept losing the front line, and he kept complaining the entire game, like, "Hey, listen, this is like the DPS. We need more consistent damage." And he kept blaming and coming up with all these excuses about why the enemy team kept moving a payload. And to be fair, we ended up winning this map pretty handily. Like, we stopped them by point 0.2 while we completed the map on our attack run. And yet these people were like really stuck on arguing like, oh, the DPS are like not doing this right. While here we were, I think it was like Thrill and this other DPS and me kind of like just standing in the back looking at how this tank was just throwing himself into the fray. And then later we asked him like, Ryan, why are you playing so aggressive? Like you're dying in seconds. You're not really getting us enough time to like get in there. And even though we're winning fights, we're winning them is because of the sheer ability of these two guys that are just like killing people left and right, right? And then he admitted like, "Oh, I'm just not a tank main. I'm a healer main." And I guess that for him it was very frustrating. He was playing a role that he was not used to. He was probably struggling in that role, and he was dying
Right.
often. And for him, it felt like it was a losing game, even though it wasn't, right? Even though the rest of the team was doing what they were supposed to be doing, we were doing fine, and we struggled, but we ended up winning the map. But his assumption was so wrong, right? Like, oh, this is what is the problem right now in our team, and it took so much for him to like calm down. And I don't know, it's just kind of a lesson of calm down and stop blaming it on other people, because sometimes what you think the thing is going wrong is not really the thing that is going wrong. Sometimes it is yourself.
Yeah, it is. And it's hard not to shift the blame when you're in a game with 6 people total and you're one of 6 and you have about 18% of influence, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
roughly 20% of the influence on your game. And it's so much easier to blame the other 80% on the other 80% of the people in the game rather than the 20% that's you. But truth of the matter is 20% can be the entire game, you know, like even if somebody is throwing, you can win 5v6 games. Like I had a game on ladder the other day when one of the guys on my team we're just playing in pre-game scrim and kept DCing, and honestly we were pretty good. Like we were stomping at 5v6 for a long time, and just I mean, you can carry people. It's possible. It's possible to carry people when you have good synergy, but sometimes like having a man down is real hard. So you have to realize that you got to synergize with your team even, and this is something Deathblow and I have preached to people that we play with every time we play. Even if you make the wrong decision, if you make the wrong decision together, it's the right call. So if you can make the wrong decision together, it's always the right decision because you're doing one thing together instead of doing separate things, and having separate game plans for a scenario that you're trying to perform in a game. So just try to get everyone on the same page, and that'll be kind of like how we wrap it up here. But let's
Yeah.
get into special thanks here. We have Tenacious Diva, which is a great name for an iTunes review this week. We got on January 11th. Thank you so much for this show. It's the best Overwatch podcast for improving gameplay. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate these reviews. Even if they're just quick ones like this, we really, really, really appreciate it. And it helps our iTunes and our search results improve. So if you want to do that, please head over to iTunes, leave us an iTunes review. We have a few people to thank over at patreon.com/OmnicLab. These people are awesome. They support us at the highest level, at the diamond level. And we have Top Score Solutions, Anthony E. or Silver Loki, Solo PS4, Jan Jinkle, Durandal, Roger B, Britmus Shazir, Chris DePlaya, Tragic Zag Lissam, Connell M, Matthew Z, and fresh off the block into the new regular patrons, we've got Scantily Platt. Very scanty. I like it. I like it. But thank you guys so much for your support. We have taken one of the largest hits that we've had in Patreon So and it would help us drastically if you guys could consider supporting us, even at the lowest level. It's totally fine if you want to support us just a little bit each episode. About $1 helps us out. It's kind of how we like to go about it at the low level. You can support us at whatever rank you have. There's just tiers there to kind of gauge of like what's popular on our feed there. If you have suggestions on things that you're looking for the show, extra features that we could provide for you on Patreon, we're more than willing to do that. We have some special things that sponsors get at the top level, of course, so you can look into that. We also want to thank those of you in our Discord. We're actually going through some pretty cool things right now where we're going to change up some things with regards to notifications in the Discord. We're going to separate out our patch notes and our Omnic Lab updates and just general Blizzard updates and Owl recap stuff so you guys can get pinged only when you opt into it. So we're working with Crispy and our admin on that, as well as kind of some restructuring and some deleting of some other channels. So if you guys are looking for some more cool stuff, be on the lookout for the Discord this week and join the community and hang out. We've been editing some of that stuff and trimming down some of the fat, as well as making sure that rules are a little bit easier to understand and grasp in a short manner. Andres, that's going to do it for the show. Where can people find the show? Where can people find you?
If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at iPlayGames. If you want to find the show, you can do so on Twitter over at Omnic Lab. You can also find the website over at omniclab.com, or you can email over at omniclabpodcast@gmail.com.
If you guys want to find me, I'm on Twitter with the tag NotRob, as well as Instagram. I also have a Twitch feed called NotRobMay. You can find me there. And you can catch my actual last episode on Velen's Chosen podcast if you like Hearthstone. I wanted to focus more on Omnic Lab as well as family and some other things. And if you want to get more details on that, you can see that on the 2-hour special for my last episode on Velen's Chosen podcast at velenschosen.com. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you guys... remember, don't be a lab rat, be a scientist. We'll see you next week. And be good to each other out there, okay? See ya.
Thanks to everyone in the chat. KFC for everyone. Ooh, I like that name. I actually haven't had KFC in a long time. We've been eating Popeyes over here in Georgia.
There's actually KFC about 2 cities over that I can get.
Oh, really? Look
and
at you.
I still haven't had it in 2 years.
KFC in Japan.
It is one of the things that they think here in Japan. KFC is Christmas, man. Fried chicken for Christmas.
Wanted Winston Burning Blue, my man. Overwatch League's about to start. You excited, dude? Also, thanks to Refire OFC. He's been in the chat for the past couple of times. Thanks for coming, dude.
Refire. Of course.
Meet the Ben was also here.
Bye, guys. Thank
Bye,
you
guys.
so much.